These Small Hours with Russell Cordell Staker. A pleasant good evening, my friends. Welcome back. This is the Small Hours podcast, and I am Russell Cordell Staker. It's a very hot 6th of July, 2022 in Austin, Texas. And coming to you after the kids are in bed and have some time to go through what is now going to be the fifth portion of Walt Whitman's 1855 Leaves of Grass. As I've been doing, and if you've been following along with this particular project, going through Walt Whitman, I've been leaving, as I described it a couple of podcasts ago, little breadcrumbs on the water, which are going to come together in a nice woven tapestry or some kind of fabric that I'm weaving here at the very end. So tonight's the fifth, and very soon I'll be releasing the sixth portion of this, which will be the conclusion of the reading of Whitman's 1855 Leaves of Grass. And then I'm going to pull this all together in a way that I think is going to be really refreshing. I hope along the way that I have been saying things that have not only inspired you to read Whitman, but have opened new frames of thinking and consideration points in your own daily life. I know that as I go through my own reading and the things that I'm discovering, it's a 360-degree view in which I call upon memories that I've got stored deep inside, as well as observations that are happening in real time. And all of it is almost like a projection that enables me to see forward. And so it's a very unique thing to feel how I, in my own small way, am applying literature and language to deepen the experience of my life, even when so much of living seems rather, it can be boring at times, it can be very mundane, it can be tedious, all of the things that we all understand. But I always come back to, and I tell myself this, Russell, what is it that you can get up in the morning and tell yourself that you will find greater meaning in and through? And it's always, for me, language. And Whitman, because of who he was, and certainly his gift with language, he's been a seer for me. And it's enabled me to look at a broader view, as well as I feel a connection to him. And it's not just because we both share a birthday on May 31. I've known for a long, long time that I've had the same birthday as Walt Whitman. But I've grown up into Whitman, and I think the experience of my own perspective in life has allowed me to feel a kinship with him. And ultimately, it really doesn't matter whether we share a birthday with a writer or an artist or whatever. It's that we feel a kinship in the experience that they express, that we too share in, and then we find ourselves expressing in our own unique, melodic way. So before I get started reading this fifth portion, which is a beautiful segment that's coming, and I hope you'll listen very closely to Walt Whitman and what he has to say in this next segment that I'm going to read, I was thinking of a particular moment in my life that I think is in symmetry with what's going to be presented tonight. And after I got done rereading this particular portion on my own a few days back, and I've read, as I'd mentioned to you in earlier podcasts, I've been reading Leaves of Grass on and off for a great many years in my life. But in this latest time in which I've really been closely paying attention to what he's been saying, I hearkened back to a very particular moment in my life. And this will come across as a memory and almost a singularity, but in reality, it's not. It's a memory that spans a good 2, possibly 3 summers, beginning when I was about 16. So it would be in 1990, in the spring through that summer, well through to about 1993. And in each of these subsequent moments, it was a chunk of spring and summer in which I worked for the grocery store Albertsons. I grew up in Inglewood, Colorado, went to Cherry Creek High School, graduated in 1992. And my sophomore year, I got a job as a bagger at Albertsons. And to this day, and I no joke, I've worked a lot of different jobs in my life. It's probably hands down one of the greatest jobs I've ever had. And it's one that I look back on quite fondly because of the experience. And some of the observation points that I gathered that I wasn't expecting that I would gather, but it's something that I revisit often. And so as I was reading this portion of Whitman, it was all too natural for me to go back to my Albertsons days. And there were a few occasions in which I was even awarded the Employee of the Month. I loved my job so much that I guess I stood out. I was a really tall, handsome, blonde kid. I've lost my hair in the years since. I shave my head now, but I was a sight to see. I wish I had the photograph of what I looked like when I was the Employee of the Month a few different times there, in which I was wearing my blue Albertsons apron, and they put it on a little placard at the front of the store. And anyway, I'm not trying to toot my horn. What I'm getting at is that I was, as Bob Seger describes in the song Like a Rock, I was a sight to see. I was tall, I was sinewy, I was slender, I looked really good in my blue apron, and I was always helpful and very energetic. These are all traits that have remained with me. Bright-eyed, quick-limbed, and jolly by nature, but also extremely helpful. And I was always very observant of the people that would come and go. I particularly made a point of helping the ladies that would come in with their kids, or the older women that would come in, and I knew they were trying to, take their groceries out to the car, the normal bagger things. I wasn't any more different or exceptional than any other, but to me, it was an honor. It was something that I looked forward to. And the task of bagging groceries as well as rounding up the carts was the setting, but I was using all of that as almost like a front row seat, as if I was at a concert, to a world that was going on around me, that was giving me insight into things that at that time, at the tender age of 16, 17, 18, I couldn't have fully understood, but I was getting little glimpses at. Because let's face it, when we go to the grocery store, think about this. The grocery store is a moment of complete, and I'm going to say a word that maybe this isn't correct, but it's mundacity. It's extremely mundane. It's tedious. It's boring. Sometimes it's a laborious effort. David Foster Wallace talked about that in his eloquent speech, This is Water, that even a moment in the grocery store, in a checkout line, when you're tired and you've worked so hard and you're at the end of your day, and all you want to do is go home and have your supper and maybe get to bed early so that you can get up the next day and start the day over again. As David Foster Wallace described it, that is exactly the moment, believe it or not, that has the same energy and power as the fire that lights the stars. And I was getting that, even though I didn't know who this is long before I knew about David Foster Wallace, but later in life, when I came to that, I said in my heart, yes, he's right, because I was getting that viewpoint in 1990, 1991, 1992, 1993, that particular chunk of my time. So with that, I want to describe what will sound like a singularity of a moment, but this was something that happened on a very regular basis while I worked at Albertsons as a bagger. On many nights, I would close the store. Now, back in the day, and I'm sure my memory is a bit skewed here, Albertsons didn't stay open 24 hours, at least when I worked there. And this store was off Arapahoe Road in unincorporated Arapahoe County, which today I'm not sure if Greenwood Village has swallowed it up, but it was right next door to what was then called the Fiddler's Green Amphitheater. And I'm sure it's named after something else now. I live in Texas and I've long since left Colorado, so I'm not sure what it's called. But the job was, it was a wonderful opportunity for me to do various things that put me in a very introspective state. And one of the tasks that I had was closing the store on many of those nights. So around 10 o'clock at night, when I would work the late shift, one of the key responsibilities that I was entrusted, and I actually took great privilege in this because the head produce guy at the time, I can see his face, I don't remember his name, was very particular about how the produce section looked. And of course, this is not unique. If you've ever been in a grocery environment or worked in the food service business, the vegetables are a big part of the centerpiece of how a store should look and feel. You don't want to walk into a grocery store with just rotten fruit and veg all over the place. And there's an ambiance and a certain aesthetic that is vitally important to the success of that store. And this particular man was very, very adamant that I made sure that things looked a certain way. And each night, as I learned the ropes of how to tuck in the greens and the potatoes in their gunny sacks, and the grapes and the bananas and the onions and on and on and on, the various things that were done, I got to a point where my own fastidious nature and organization took control. And he knew that I was going to do a really good job. And I did. I took really good care of that. I made sure that that particular segment of the store was just pristine. It was lovely. And it was a place that as I would close it down, I had a very unique feeling. And that's what I'm getting at and I want to describe. And I hope I do a good job of this. But I felt as if standing in the very midst, and this is what I would do. I'd go to the very middle part of that store. I can see it right now. And it's actually a really emotional thing. So I'm sorry, I'm getting a little struck with this, but I would stand right dead center in the middle of the produce section and nobody would be there. Maybe there'd be like one last customer walking by. Of course, the main guys at the front that were cleaning out the registers or whatever, there'd be various workers kind of hobbling about or, passing about, but I would usually be alone in that moment. And I would have this sense of it would be as if the world was all of a sudden miniaturized, that in the centerpiece of where I stood, the whole universe resided within this produce section. And I could hear the sound of the little sprinklers that would come on over the fresh vegetables, the radishes, that tss that would come on, and the damp gunny sacks that I would position in a way to cover the potatoes, because a potato, it needs to be covered during the long hours. Otherwise, sometimes depending on the heat and the light, it can turn a really dark, gross color. And I'm probably saying this all wrong. I don't remember the exact reason for that, but there were things that had to be set a certain way. And I remember just being in that moment, and it wasn't just a produce section for me. It embodied all of the world. And as I would stand there and I would see everything that was organized in its right place, in its right fit, measure, moment, I would think also about the chaos of the world outside that store and beyond. I would think about the faces of the ladies that I'd helped during the day. Some of the ladies I was in love with, the moms that would come in that were really pretty. Some of the ladies that I could tell had a lot of stress that I worried about, and men too. I don't want to say I was just exclusive, but I would think about how, there would be some men that would come in and they looked like they had the weight of the world on their shoulders. And I would be curious about what it was that was holding them up, what it was that was maybe holding them back from feeling better about themselves. There was just a visible, tangible sense of the expression on the faces of the people that I would see. And I would extend that out beyond not just Englewood, Colorado, but the broader domestic United States. And then I would think about places like Europe and Asia. And then I would think, because I was a big fan of aviation and I grew up in a house where my dad just loved, space program and all of that stuff, I would think about the Saturn V rocket and how it would launch out into the stratosphere and go out beyond in propelling the capsule that got the men to the moon. And I would think about like the Viking rocket program that NASA had put together, and these big deep space rockets that would go out into the nether regions, or not nether, the nether's the low regions, but the beyond regions that were just infinite, that would travel these vast distances in space, and wondered about what was out there. I know this is going to sound really crazy, but in the moment of me standing there, all of about 6'2" at the time, I would become 6'4" later, tall, thin, blonde-haired kid, but curious, standing amongst produce and having these thoughts. And I would wonder about how it was that such order, such peace, this cozy ambiance that I had could bring about this sense of understanding things that I couldn't even begin to understand. And even as I describe it right now, I know I'm not even able to scratch the surface of what I really want to say in my heart, because it's impossible. It was a feeling more than it was an actual definition. And that's, believe it or not, what I think we're going to feel. I felt anyway when I read what's going to come here in this next portion. And before I start reading it, I want to mention a particular song that used to come on the radio in the Muzak that was played above the airwaves at Albertsons, and particularly in that moment as I'm describing it at night, when it would be really calm and quiet, and I'd put the fruit and veg to bed. And I could hear that sprinkler off in the corner wetting the radishes and the cucumbers, and that tsh, and it was a loop. And of course there were a bunch of songs that were played, but every night at that particular time or around thereabouts, the Doobie Brothers song, "It Keeps You Running," would come on. And to this day, it's one of my most favorite songs because of that. It's a song that comes from their just classic album, Taking It to the Streets, from 1976. I was born in 74. My dad loved the Doobies. I was familiar with the record, but being at Albertsons, that song took on a whole different meaning. And I'm just going to quote just briefly part of that lyric. in which the doobies sing, "From here I can feel your heartbeat. Oh, you got me all wrong. You ain't got to worry. I know what it means to hide your heart from a long time ago. Oh, darling, it keeps you running. Yeah, it keeps you running. It keeps you running." Even now, I can feel the power of that song with the observation that I just made, because it was hinting at things that I myself knew someday, later in my life, if I was lucky enough to live long enough, that maybe I'd begin to understand. And I think now, here I am, 2022, some 30 years later. I'm in my late 40s now. All of this is coming back. And it comes back in the trigger of me reading the words of Walt Whitman. So that is my introduction. Please sit back, get yourself a cold beverage, and let this fifth portion of the 1855 original edition of The Leaves of Grass take hold of your heart. And on the back end of this, I have some further observation to add some depth. I'll see you on the other side. Leaves of Grass. I wander all night in my vision, stepping with light feet swiftly and noiselessly stepping and stopping, bending with open eyes over the shut eyes of sleepers, wandering and confused, lost to myself, ill-assorted, contradictory, pausing and gazing and bending and stopping. How solemn they look there, stretched and still. How quiet they breathe, the little children in their cradles. The wretched features of ennuis, the white features of corpses, the livid faces of drunkards, the sick gray faces of onanists, the gashed bodies on battlefields, the insane in their strong-doored rooms, the sacred idiots, the newborn emerging from gates, and the dying emerging from gates. The night pervades them and enfolds them. The married couple sleep calmly in their bed, he with his palm on the hip of the wife, and she with her palm on the hip of the husband. The sisters sleep lovingly side by side in their bed. The men sleep lovingly side by side in theirs. And the mother sleeps with her little child carefully wrapped. The blind sleep, and the deaf and dumb sleep. The prisoner sleeps well in the prison. The runaway son sleeps. The murderer, that is to be hung next day, how does he sleep? And the murdered person, how does he sleep? The female that loves unrequited sleeps, and the male that loves unrequited sleeps. The head of the money-maker that plotted all day sleeps, and the enraged and treacherous dispositions sleep. I stand with drooping eyes by the worst suffering and restless. I pass my hands soothingly to and fro a few inches from them. The restless sink in their beds, they fitfully sleep. The earth recedes from me into the night. I saw that it was beautiful, and I see that what is not the earth is beautiful. I go from bedside to bedside. I sleep close with the other sleepers, each in turn. I dream in my dream all the dreams of the other dreamers, and I become the other dreamers. I am a dance. Play up there. The fit is whirling me fast. I am the ever laughing. It is new moon and twilight. I see the hiding of douceurs. I see nimble ghosts whichever way I look. Cash and cash again, deep in the ground and sea, and where it is neither ground or sea. Well do they do their jobs, those journeymen divine. Only from me can they hide nothing, and would not if they could. I reckon I am their boss, and they make me a pet besides, and surround me and lead me and run ahead when I walk, and lift their cunning covers and signify me with stretched arms and resume the way. Onward we move, a gay gang of blackguards with mirth-shouting music and wild flapping pennants of joy. I am the actor and the actress. the voter, the politician, the emigrant, and the exile, the criminal that stood in the box who has been famous and who shall be famous after today, the stammerer, the well-formed person, the wasted or feeble person. I am she who adorned herself and folded her hair expectantly. My truant lover has come, and it is dark. Double yourself and receive me in darkness. Receive me and my lover too. He will not let me go without him. I roll myself upon you as upon a bed. I resign myself to the dusk. He whom I call answers me and takes the place of my lover. He rises with me silently from the bed. Darkness, you are gentler than my lover. His flesh was sweaty and panting. I feel the hot moisture yet that he left me. My hands are spread forth. I pass them in all directions. I would sound up the shadowy shore to which you are journeying. Be careful, darkness. Already, what was it? It touched me. I thought my lover had gone, else darkness and he are one. I hear the heartbeat. I follow. I fade away. Oh, hot-cheeked and blushing, oh, foolish hectic, oh, for pity's sake, no one must see me now. My clothes were stolen while I was abed. Now I am thrust forth. Where shall I run? Pier that I saw dimly last night when I looked from the windows, peer out from the main, let me catch myself with you and stay. I will not chafe you. I feel ashamed to go naked about the world, and I'm curious to know where my feet stand. And what is this flooding me, childhood or manhood, and the hunger that crosses the bridge between? The cloth laps a first sweet eating and drinking, laps life-swelling yolks, laps ear of rose corn milky and just ripened. The white teeth stay, and the boss tooth advances in darkness, and liquor is spilled on lips and bosoms by touching glasses, and the best liquor afterward. I descend my western course. My sinews are flaccid, perfume and youth course through me, and I am their wake. It is my face yellow and wrinkled instead of the old woman's. I sit low in a straw-bottomed chair and carefully darn my grandson's stockings. It is I, too, the sleepless widow. Looking out on the winter midnight, I see the sparkles of starshine on the icy and pallid earth. A shroud I see, and I am the shroud. I wrap a body and lie in the coffin. It is dark here underground. It is not evil or pain here. It is blank here for reasons. It seems to me that everything in the light and air ought to be happy. Whoever is not in his coffin and the dark grave, let him know he has enough. I see a beautiful and gigantic swimmer, naked through the eddies of the sea. His brown hair lies close and even to his head. He strikes out with courageous arms. He urges himself with his legs. I see his white body. I see his undaunted eyes. I hate the swift-running eddies that would dash him head foremost on the rocks. What are you doing, you ruffianly, red-trickled waves? Will you kill the courageous giant? Will you kill him in the prime of his middle age? Steady and long he struggles. He is baffled and banged and bruised. He holds out while his strength holds out. The slapping eddies are spotted with his blood. They bear him away. They roll him and swing him and turn him. His beautiful body is borne in the circling eddies. It is continually bruised on rocks. Swiftly and out of sight is borne the brave corpse. I turn, but do not extricate myself, confused. A past reading, another, but with darkness yet. The beach is cut by the razory ice wind. The wreck guns sound. The tempest lulls, and the moon comes floundering through the drifts. I look where the ship helplessly heads on. I hear the burst as she strikes. I hear the howls of dismay. They grow fainter and fainter. I cannot aid with my ringing fingers. I can but rush to the surf and let it drench me and freeze upon me. I search with the crowd. Not one of the company is washed to us alive. In the morning I help pick up the dead and lay them in rows in a barn. Now of the old war days, the defeat at Brooklyn. Washington stands inside the lines. He stands on the entrenched hills amid a crowd of officers. His face is cold and damp. He cannot repress the weeping drops. He lifts the glass perpetually to his eyes. The color is blanched from his cheeks. He sees the slaughter of the Southern braves, confided to him by their parents. The same at last when peace is declared. He stands in the room of the old tavern. The well-beloved soldiers all pass through. The officers, speechless and slow, draw near in their turns. The chief encircles their necks with his arms and kisses them on the cheek. His kisses lightly, the wet cheeks one after another. He shakes hands and bids goodbye to the army. Now I tell what my mother told me today as we sat at dinner together, of when she was nearly grown girl, living home with her parents on the old homestead. A red squaw came one breakfast time to the old homestead. On her back she carried a bundle of rushes for rush-bottoming chairs. Her hair, straight, shiny, coarse black, and profuse, half enveloped her face. Her step was free and elastic. Her voice sounded exquisitely as she spoke. My mother looked in delight and amazement at the stranger. She looked at the beauty of her tall-born face and full and pliant limbs. The more she looked upon her, she loved her. Never before she had seen such wonderful beauty and purity. She made her sit on a bench by the jamb of the fireplace. She cooked food for her. She had no work to give her, but she gave her remembrance and fondness. The red squaw stayed all the forenoon. Toward the middle of the afternoon, she went away. Oh, my mother was loath to have her go away. All the week she thought of her. She watched for her many a month. She remembered her many a winter and many a summer. But the red squaw never came, nor was heard of there again. Now Lucifer was not dead. Or if he was, I am his sorrowful, terrible heir. I have been wronged. I am oppressed. I hate him that oppresses me. I will either destroy him or he shall release me. Damn him. How he does defile me. How he informs against my brother and sister and takes pay for their blood. How he laughs when I look down the bend after the steamboat that carries away my woman. Now the vast dusk bulk. Bulk, that is the whale's bulk. It seems mine, warily, sportsman. Though I lie so sleepy and sluggish, my tap is death. A show of the summer softness, a contact of something unseen, and a more of the light and air. I am jealous and overwhelmed with friendliness, and will go gallivant with the light and the air myself, and have an unseen something to be in contact with them also. O love and summer, you are in the dreams, and in me. Autumn and winter are in the dreams. The farmer goes with his thrift. The droves and crops increase. The barns are well filled. Elements merge in the night. Ships make tacks in the dreams. The sailor sails. The exile returns home. The fugitive returns unharmed. The immigrant is back beyond months and years. The poor Irishman lives in the simple house of his childhood with the well-known neighbors and faces. They warmly welcome him. He is barefoot again. He forgets he is well off. The Dutchman voyages home, and the Scotchman and Welshman voyage home, and the native of the Mediterranean voyages home. To every port of England and France and Spain enter well-filled ships. The Swiss foots it towards his hills. The Prussian goes his way, and the Hungarian his way, and the Pole goes his way. The Swede returns, and the Dane and Norwegian return. The homeward bound and the outward bound, the beautiful lost swimmer, the ennui and the onanist, the female that loves unrequited, the moneymaker, the actor and actress, those through with their parts and those waiting to commence. The affectionate boy, the husband and wife, the voter, the nominee that is chosen and the nominee that has failed, the great already known and the great any time after today, the stammerer, the sick, the perfect formed, the homely, the criminal that stood in the box, the judge that sat and sentenced him, the fluent lawyers, the jury, the audience, the laughter and weeper, the dancer, the midnight widow, the red squaw, the consumptive, the irrecipilant, the idiot, he that is wronged, the antipodes, and every one between this and them in the dark. I swear they are averaged now. One is no better than the other. The night and sleep have likened them and restored them. I swear they are all beautiful. Everyone that sleeps is beautiful. Everything in the dim night is beautiful. The wildest and bloodiest is over, and all is peace. Peace is always beautiful. The myth of heaven indicates peace and night. The myth of heaven indicates the soul. The soul is always beautiful. It appears more or it appears less. It comes or it lags behind. It comes from its embowered garden and looks pleasantly on itself and encloses the world. Perfect and clean, the genitals previously jetting, and perfect and clean, the womb cohering. The head well grown and proportioned and plumb, and the bowels and joints proportioned and plumb. The soul is always beautiful. The universe is duly in order. Everything is in its place. What is arrived is in its place, and what waits is in its place. The twisted skull waits, the watery or rotten blood waits. The child of the glutton or venereally waits long, and the child of the drunkard waits long, and the drunkard himself waits long. The sleepers that lived and died wait. The far advanced are to go on in their turns, and the far behind are to go on in their turns. The diverse shall be no less diverse, but they shall flow and unite. They unite now. The sleepers are very beautiful as they lie unclothed. They flow hand in hand over the whole earth from east to west as they lie unclothed. The Asiatic and African are hand in hand. The European and American are hand in hand. Learned and unlearned are hand in hand, and male and female are hand in hand. The bare arm of the girl crosses the bare breast of her lover. They press close without lust. His lips press her neck. The father holds his grown or ungrown son in his arms with measureless love, and the son holds the father in his arms with measureless love. The white hair of the mother shines on the white wrist of the daughter. The breath of the boy goes with the breath of the man. Friend is inarmed by friend. The scholar kisses the teacher, and the teacher kisses the scholar. The wronged is made right. The call of the slave is one with the master's call, and the master salutes the slave. The felon steps forth from the prison. The insane becomes sane. The suffering of sick persons is relieved. The sweatings and fevers stop. The throat that was unsound is sound. The lungs of the consumptive are resumed. The poor, distressed head is free. The joints of the rheumatic move as smoothly as ever and smoother than ever. Stiflings and passages open. The paralyzed become supple. The swelled and convulsed and congested awake to themselves in condition. They pass the invigoration of the night and the chemistry of the night and awake. I too pass from the night. I stay a while away, O night, but I return to you again and love you. Why should I be afraid to trust myself to you? I am not afraid. I have been well brought forward by you. I love the rich running day, but I do not desert her in whom I lay so long. I know not how I came of you, and I know not where I go with you, but I know I came well and shall go well. I will stop only a time with the night and rise betimes. I will duly pass the day, O my mother, and duly return to you. Not you will yield forth the dawn again, more surely than you will yield forth me again. Not the womb yields the babe in its time more surely than I shall be yielded from you in my time. Leaves of grass. The bodies of men and women engirth me, and I engirth them. They will not let me off, nor I them till I go with them and respond to them and love them. Was it dreamed whether those who corrupted their own live bodies could conceal themselves, and whether those who defiled the living were as bad as they who defiled the dead? The expression of the body of man or woman balks account. The man is perfect, and that of the female is perfect. The male is perfect, and that of the female is perfect. The expression of a well-made man appears not only in his face, it is in his limbs and joints also. It is curiously in the joints of his hips and wrists. It is in his walk, the carriage of his neck, the flex of his waist and knees. Dress does not hide him. The strong, sweet, supple quality he has strikes through the cotton and flannel. To see him pass conveys as much as the best poem, perhaps more. You linger to see his back and the back of his neck and shoulder side. The sprawl and fullness of babes, the bosoms and heads of women, the folds of their dress, their style as we pass in the street, the contour of their shape downwards. The swimmer naked in the swimming bath, seen as he swims through the salt, transparent green shine, or lies on his back and rolls silently with the heave of the water. Framers, bare-armed, framing a house, hoisting the beams in their places, or using the mallet and mortising chisel. The bending forward and backward of rowers and rowboats, the horseman in his saddle. Girls and mothers and housekeepers in all their exquisite offices. The group of laborers seated at noontime with their open dinner kettles and their wives waiting. The female soothing a child, the farmer's daughter in the garden or cowyard. The woodman rapidly swinging his axe in the woods, the young fellow hoeing corn, the sleigh driver guiding his 6 horses through the crowd. The wrestle of wrestlers, 2 apprentice boys, quite grown, lusty, good-natured, native-born, out on the vacant lot at sundown after work. The coats, vests, and caps thrown down, the embrace of love and resistance, the upper hold and under hold, the hair rumpled over and blinding the eyes, the march of firemen in their own costumes, the play of the masculine muscle through the clean-setting trousers and waistbands, the slow return from the fire, the pause when the bell strikes suddenly again, the listening on the alert, the natural, perfect, and varied attitudes, the bent head, the curved neck, the counting. Such like I love, I loosen myself and pass freely, and am at the mother's breast with the little child, and swim with the swimmer, and wrestle with the wrestlers, and march in line with the firemen, and pause, and listen, and count. I knew a man, he was a common farmer. He was the father of 5 sons, and in them were the fathers of sons, and in them were the fathers of sons. This man was of wonderful vigor and calmness and beauty of person. The shape of his head, the richness and breadth of his manners, the pale yellow and white of his hair and beard, the immeasurable meaning of his black eyes, these I used to go and visit him to see. He was wise also. He was 6 feet tall. He was over 80 years old. His sons were massive, clean-bearded, tan-faced, and handsome. They and his daughters loved him, and all who saw him loved him. They did not love him by allowance. They loved him with personal love. He drank water only. The blood showed like scarlet through the clear brown skin of his face. He was a frequent gunner and fisher. He sailed his boat himself. He had a fine one presented to him by a ship joiner. He had fowling pieces presented to him by men that loved him. When he went with his 5 sons and many grandsons to hunt or fish, you would pick him out as the most beautiful and vigorous of the gang. You would wish long and long to be with him. You would wish to sit by him in the boat, that you and he might touch each other. I've perceived that to be with those I like is enough. To stop in company with the rest at evening is enough. To be surrounded by beautiful, curious, breathing, laughing flesh is enough. To pass among them, to touch anyone, to rest my arm ever so lightly round his or her neck for a moment. What is this then? I do not ask any more delight. I swim in it as in a sea. There is something in staying close to men and women and looking on them and in the contact and odor of them that pleases the soul well. All things please the soul, but these please the soul well. This is the female form. A divine nimbus exhales from it, from head to foot. It attracts with fierce, undeniable attraction. I am drawn by its breath, as if I were no more than a helpless vapor. All falls aside, but myself and it. Books, art, religion, time, the visible and solid earth, the atmosphere and the fringed clouds, what was expected of heaven or feared of hell are now consumed. Mad filaments, ungovernable shoots play out of it, the response likewise ungovernable. Hair, bosom, hips, bend of legs, negligent falling hands, all diffused, mine too diffused. Ebb stung by the flow and flow stung by the ebb, love flesh swelling and deliciously aching. Limitless, limpid jets of love, hot and enormous, quivering jelly of love, white blow and delirious juice. Bridegroom, night of love, working surely and softly into the prostrate dawn, undulating into the willing and yielding day, lost in the cleave of the clasping and sweet-fleshed day. This is the nucleus. After the child is born of woman, the man is born of woman. This is the bath of birth. This is the merge of small and large, and the outlet again. Be not ashamed, women. Your privilege encloses the rest. It is the exit of the rest. You are the gates of the body, and you are the gates of the soul. The female contains all qualities and tempers them. She is in her place. She moves with perfect balance. She is all things duly veiled. She is both passive and active. She is to conceive daughters as well as sons, and sons as well as daughters. As I see my soul reflected in nature, as I see through a mist one with inexpressible completeness and beauty, see the bent head and arms folded over the breast, the female I see the bearer of the great fruit, which is immortality. The good thereof is not tasted by roué and never can be. The male is not less the soul nor more. He too is in his place. He too is all qualities. He is action and power. The flush of the known universe is in him. Scorn becomes him well, and appetite and defiance becomes him well. The fiercest, largest passions, bliss that is utmost and sorrow that is utmost, become him well. Pride is for him. The full spread pride of man is calming and excellent to the soul. Knowledge becomes him. He likes it always. He brings everything to the test of himself. Whatever the survey, whatever the sea and the sail, he strikes soundings at last only here. Where else does he strike soundings except here? The man's body is sacred and the woman's body is sacred. It is no matter who. Is it a slave? Is it one of the dull-faced immigrants just landed on the wharf? Each belongs here or anywhere just as much as the well-off, just as much as you. Each has his or her place in the procession. All is a procession. The universe is a procession with measured and beautiful motion. Do you know so much that you call the slave or the dull-faced ignorant? Do you suppose you have a right to a good sight, and he or she has no right to a sight? Do you think matter has cohered together from its diffused float, and the soil is on the surface and water runs, the vegetation sprouts for you and not for him and her. A slave at auction. I help the auctioneer. The Slaven does not half know his business. Gentlemen, look on this curious creature. Whatever the bids of the bidders, they cannot be high enough for him. For him, the globe lay preparing quintillions of years without one animal or plant. For him, the revolving cycles truly and steadily rolled. In that head and the all-baffling brain, in it and below it, in the making of the attributes of heroes. Examine these limbs, red, black, or white. They are very cunning and tendon and nerve. They shall be stripped that you may see them. Exquisite senses, lifelet eyes, pluck, volition. Flakes of breast muscle, pliant backbone and neck, flesh not flabby, good-sized arms and legs, and wonders within there yet. Within there runs his blood, the same old blood, the same red running blood. There swells and jets his heart. There all passions and desires, all reachings and aspirations. Do you think they are not there because they are not expressed in parlors and lecture rooms? This is not only one man. He is the father of those who shall be fathers in their turns. In him, the start of populous states and rich republics. Of him, countless immortal lives with countless embodiments and enjoyments. How do you know who shall come from the offspring of his offspring through the centuries? Who might you find you have come from yourself if you could trace back through the centuries? A woman at auction, she too is not only herself, she is the teeming mother of mothers. She is the bearer of them that shall grow and be mates to the mothers. Her daughters or their daughters' daughters. Who knows who shall mate with them? Who knows through the centuries what heroes may come from them? In them and of them natal love. In them the divine mystery, the same old beautiful mystery. Have you ever loved a woman? Your mother? Is she living? Have you been much with her? And has she been much with you? Do you not see that these are exactly the same to all, in all nations and times, all over the earth? In life and the soul are sacred, the human body is sacred, and the glory and sweet of a man is the token of manhood untainted. And in man or woman, a clean, strong, firm-fibered body is beautiful as the most beautiful face. Have you seen the fool that corrupted his own live body, or the fool that corrupted her own live body? For they do not conceal themselves and cannot conceal themselves. Who degrades or defiles the living human body is cursed. Who degrades or defiles the body of the dead is not more cursed. Leaves of grass, sauntering the pavement, or riding the country by-road, here then are faces. Faces of friendship, precision, caution, suavity, ideality. The spiritual, prescient face, the always welcome, common, benevolent face. The face of the singing of music, the grand faces of natural lawyers and judges broad at the backtop. The faces of hunters and fishers bulged at the brows. The shaved, blanched faces of orthodox citizens. The pure, extravagant, yearning, questioning artist's face. The welcome, ugly face of some beautiful soul. The handsome, detested, or despised face. The sacred face of infants. The illuminated face of the mother of many children. The face of an amour. The face of a veneration. The face as of a dream. The face of an immobile rock. The face withdrawn of its good and bad. A castrated face. A wild hawk, his wings clipped by the clipper, a stallion that yielded at last to the thongs and knife of the gelder. Sauntering the pavement or crossing the ceaseless ferry, here then are faces. I see them and complain not, and am content with all. Do you suppose I could be content with all if I thought them their own finale? This now is too lamentable a face for a man. Some abject louse asking leave to be, cringing for it, some milk-nosed maggot blessing what lets it rig to its hole. This face is a dog's snout sniffing for garbage. Snakes nest in that mouth. I hear the sibilant threat. This face is of haze more chill than the Arctic Sea. Its sleepy and wobbling icebergs crunch as they go. This is a face of bitter herbs. This is an emetic. They need no label, and more of the drug shelf. Laudanum, caoutchouc, or hog's lard. This face is an epilepsy advertising and doing business. Its wordless tongue gives out the unearthly cry. Its veins down the neck distend, its eyes roll till they show nothing but their whites. Its teeth grit, the palms of the hands are cut by the turned-in nails. The man falls, struggling and foaming to the ground, while he speculates well. This face is bitten by vermin and worms, and this is some murderer's knife, with a half-pulled scabbard. This face owes to the sexton his dismalest fee. An unceasing death bell tolls there. Those are really men, the bosses and toughs of the great round globe. Features of my equals, would you trick me with your creased and cadaverous march? Well, then you cannot trick me. I see your rounded, never-erased flow. I see neath the rims of your haggard and mean disguises. Splay and twist as you like. Poke with the tangling fours of fishes or rats. You'll be unmuzzled, you certainly will. I saw the face of the most smeared and slobbering idiot they had at the asylum, and I knew for my consolation what they knew not. I knew of the agents that emptied and broke my brother, the same weight to clear the rubbish from the fallen tenement. And I shall look again in a score or two of ages, and I shall meet the real landlord, perfect and unharmed, every inch as good as myself. The Lord advances and yet advances, always the shadow in front, always the reached hand, bringing up the laggards. Out of this face emerge banners and horses. Oh, superb! I see what is coming. I see the high pioneer caps. I see the staves of runners clearing the way. I hear victorious drums. This face is a lifeboat. This is the face commanding and bearded. It asks no odds of the rest. This face is flavored fruit ready for eating. This face of a healthy, honest boy is the program of all good. These faces bear testimony, slumbering or awake. They show their descent from the Master himself. Off the word I have spoken, I accept not one, red, white, or black. All are deific. In each house is the ovum. It comes forth after 1,000 years. Spots or cracks at the windows do not disturb me. Tall and sufficient stand behind and make signs to me. I read the promise and patiently wait. This is a full-grown lily's face. She speaks to the limber-hipped man near the garden pickets. Come here, she blushingly cries. Come nigh to me, limber-hipped man, and give me your finger and thumb. Stand at my side till I lean as high as I can upon you. Fill me with albescent honey. Bend down to me. Rub to me with your chafing beard, rub to my breast and shoulders. The old face of the mother of many children, whist, I am fully content. Lulled and late as the smoke of the Sabbath morning, it hangs low over the rows of trees by the fences. It hangs thin by the sassafras, the wild cherry, and the catbrier under them. I saw the rich ladies in full dress at the soiree. I heard what the run of poets were saying so long, heard who sprang in crimson youth from the white froth and the water blue. Behold a woman. She looks out from her Quaker cap. Her face is clearer and more beautiful than the sky. She sits in an armchair under the shaded porch of the farmhouse. The sun just shines on her old white head. Her ample gown is of cream-hued linen. Her grandsons raised the flax, and her granddaughters spun it with distaff and the wheel. The melodious character of the earth, the finish beyond which philosophy cannot go and does not wish to go. The justified mother of men. And here I conclude the fifth portion, the reading of Walt Whitman's 1855 Leaves of Grass. Simply magnificent. This particular portion, when I read this through at first, I wasn't sure entirely what I was reading. It was an interesting feeling because I'm versed enough in reading the Leaves of Grass that I had a sense going into each of the portions that I designated as being a portion that I wanted to break up. But this one was it was enigmatic. And it wasn't until I got all the way through it and then I had that trigger memory, as I described at the very beginning of this, when I shared what I described about being a bagger and all around, utility guy at Albertsons, that things came into view. There is a particular moment in this segment that really, really stood out when he talks about that beautiful, gigantic swimmer swimming naked through the eddies of the sea. This image that I had was of a young man perfected, just as God or the universe would intend that beautiful, gigantic swimmer to be. his body, his undaunted eyes, the way Whitman describes them. And he enters into that swift running water, the eddies that begin to dash him head foremost on the rocks. And Whitman is aghast as he watches this, because he sees and understands, just as we all do, the beauty of that gigantic swimmer, that perfect young man. And as I see him, as Whitman saw him, going out into the rough water and taking the beating that he takes, and the slapping eddies and the blood as they bear him away. His body is rolled and swings back and forth. And then that beautiful body, as Whitman describes it, is borne in the circling eddies and bruised continually on the rocks. And he can't castrate or extricate himself. Castrate's the wrong word. Extricate himself from that razory ice wind water. And eventually he drifts off and is lost. It's an interesting metaphor, and I'm not going to even try to define that, but this is where the idea of what I remembered working at Albertsons came back for me, because in that moment of my life, in that, as I described it, it's not just a singularity of memory. It spans over a good 2-3 years of working at that store. But looking at it now, looking back, it feels like just one instant, even though it's a composite of many instances. And maybe that's how our memory really ultimately works, which makes it kind of a half-true memory sometimes, right? We remember things that we think we remember, but maybe they're not exactly as they really were. And so what we do is we take a composite, a snapshot of a broader viewpoint. And this was something that became very, very clear to me, and I remembered how it was to be that young, to be that perfect in my own sense of myself, and yet undaunted and beginning the true journey that was up ahead. And I'm well into that journey now. I don't know how far or wide my journey goes. Nobody does. But I'm a lot further into it now, and I certainly have a depth and range of experience, and I've been dashed upon the rocks many, many times. And I've had experiences that have flipped me over in that water, and I'm gasping for air, and there's blood coming down the side of my temples from a few of those bruises that I've taken on the rocks. This is part of the journey. This is exactly what it's to be. And Whitman, in many ways, is like the parent or the God figure, as well as ourselves seeing ourselves from the perfect moment that we see, that Albertsons moment, at least in my perspective, to the one that we enter into, and the brutal force that can come and that we have to experience. There is no explanation for it, and there's no logic or reason. It's something that we get into. Whitman describes often in this particular segment something where he talks about the worst suffering and the restless, and he stands by and passes his hands soothingly to and fro a few inches from them. I think about at night when I tuck my kids in bed, and I did this I've done this with all 3 kids. My youngest is 4 now, so he gets more of this attention now than the other 2 because they got it earlier and they're older, so it's not as necessary. But I check on all the kids when they're all under one roof and sleeping. It's one of the great honors and the privileges of being a father, and it's something that I remember my dad saying that he most found great fulfillment in, is at night when all of us kids, I'm the oldest of 4, he would do the same thing. He'd get up in the night, get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, whatever. But before he would tuck himself back in, he would check on each of us. And I do the same thing. And at night when I walk into the room of my youngest right now, just to make sure that he's sleeping okay. And sometimes he's kind of a sweaty sleeper, so I'll flip his pillow for him, and get him resituated. And then I'll whisper to him, and I'll say things like, I love you, little buddies. You're a sweet boy. And I'll give him a kiss. I did the same thing with my oldest, my daughter. We called her Sweet Pea. And then my middle son, Tyler the Tiger, or Aya the Tyler, as I like to call him. And I whisper these little peacekeepings that I share with them in the netherworld of their own sleep. And sometimes I think they hear it. I think in those moments that I'm hearing my own father whisper what he must have whispered to me when I was young. And that's what I feel Whitman was doing when he talks about the worst suffering and the restless, as he passes his hands over them. As I stand back and reading this fifth portion, what really is most profound to me is the idea of the rich running days that we have, the melodious character that he talks about of the earth, the finish beyond which philosophy cannot and does not wish to go. There is a flowing character, something inside of us that blends and purifies, but at the same time emboldens us into the experience of the moment that we're in, that this spread of purity lies motionless inside, but it comes out when we recognize our place within the world. And I don't mean a place as if we're defined in a place, in that we see ourselves, much like Whitman described, that beautiful swimmer that he's observing off to the side, who's taking this course through the brisk waters, but we see ourselves in that course while we're in it. It's a really weird kind of beautiful thing. Weird's probably not the right word, but it made me think about what's the question that I ask myself, and I seem to be asking more of late, is what becomes a part of a man or a woman? What becomes a part of us? And to take this thought a little further, when I was considering Albertsons, I thought about one of the things that I've always enjoyed. I love at Christmas time, actually beginning in Halloween. Halloween is my favorite time of the year, October. When October 1st rolls around, I celebrate that as the greatest day of the year because it kicks off the entire holiday season. And for me, one of the great aspects of October 1st all the way through the new year is I like setting up little villages in our house. Way back when I first got my first job out of college and I moved to Indianapolis to go work for a big drug company, there was a series of stores in a little place outside of Indianapolis that it was like three stores connected together off, I believe it was old Allisonville Road, if I remember correctly. But it was basically, the little snow villages that I'm talking about, in the holiday time, you go into those little shops and they have the little Dickens village, or they have like the retro 1950s villages where there's little hamburger hops and kind of like you're watching the American Graffiti, but it's all in this tiny little composite. And you see these little settings of like a mailman taking mail, and there's a little gas pump and a car's pulled up and the guy's putting gas in the car for the person, or there's an ice skating rink, or there's a Ferris wheel, on and on and on. All of these little things in this little miniature world that's so pristine and cozy, and the ambiance is right, and everybody seems like they're getting along, and it's just this perfect place. I love miniature snow villages, and I love setting those up in the house. So for Halloween, I'll set up a little kind of like spooky little thing. I've got a little barn house that has little flickering lights and little jack-o'-lanterns. And then it morphs into Christmas, where I've got one of those houses from Ralphie from Gene Shepard's wonderful composite writings that led to the classic 1984 movie Christmas Story, where Ralphie and Randy are, going to school, and it's got their little house with the lights on it and the naked lady lamp. And anyway, that kind of stuff to me is extremely important, because I am much like, and this is more of probably a more intimate view of maybe what Whitman's talking about, but I'm seeing myself interjected into these spaces that are perfect to me. And they're not perfect. That's the point, is that I see the flaws in the little tiny composite of the moment. Much like I did even when I was in Albertsons, there are constant flaws as I was looking at the produce, even though everything was organized and in its right space. I could expand out as I went deeper into each of those, because I could not only see the finite order of things, but I could see the disarray and the chaos as well. And I could see myself at the center of it, and yet also removed from it all at once. It's a very deep thought, but it comes back to me. And as I was reading this particular portion of Whitman, it made a lot more sense that there is this broad viewpoint in the minute and intimate and intricate detail of our lives, that when we stop and really look at it, the power of the language that we capture and hold on to all of a sudden opens up new vistas and visions, and the things that we find mundane and boring and maybe catastrophic sometimes, we can go, oh, you know what? This is just a moment. There's something more here, and it's beautiful. It's an amazing feeling. And when I get a hold of that, I think, Russell, hang on, because what you're gathering right now is not only making you better, but it's going to help so many other people, your family, the people that I get to know, the people that are listening maybe to the sounds of my own voice right now in this world that is so filled with fell, angry, ignorant voices. I'm choosing to believe that I'm actually one that offers something so completely different, and just a voice of reason and calm to remind us that we're all in this together, and we just need to take a deep breath And much like Whitman described, that this life, the worst suffering and restless, he's standing there over us, soothingly passing his hands to and fro just inches from our faces. And sometimes we don't know that he's there. And if we take that a step further, it could be the idea of God or whatever your faith is. As I close tonight, I want to just encourage you, before we get ready to read the sixth and final portion of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and then the concluding portion that's going to come after this before I begin a new avenue with my podcast. And I'm so excited to get there, but I'm also really excited about what I'm about to finish here with this. I want you to consider this moment right now as a moment of reckoning. And I don't mean this in a biblical way. You know, I think all of us, I know I'm going to speak for myself. Of course, I have to speak personally. I, on a daily basis, and sometimes more than others, feel overwhelmed and sometimes altogether disconnected. That life it feels as if, and I'm speaking of the broader world, you know, when I look at the news and I take in these gulps of what's going on in my own country, what's going on in the world. This crisis point is always, it can be overwhelming. But as I continue to read, and as I've read this time in my life, Walt Whitman, I don't see the crisis point as much as I probably would if I wasn't reading. I see it more as a pivot point that helps me to focus on the very human things that allow me to take more time to be in sight of the life that I'm living rather than out of sight of it. And I think that's what I want you to walk away with today is how often are you stepping out of sight from real life because you're either avoiding it or you're just too afraid to engage with it. And I don't mean engaging like we have to get in some confrontation or share our viewpoints. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being present in seeing the moment, much like Whitman described seeing that beautiful swimmer in the water, going through the brisk and turbulent waters that he did, and observing it from the standpoint of the necessity of that crisis. And rather than seeing it as a crisis, is rather as a pivot point. You know, it's easy to be lost in our own communities. And that's why when I thought about Albertsons, I was reminded of the peace that I felt standing amongst the fruit and veg. When I look at the snow villages, and even when my snow villages aren't set up, I'm already thinking about them right now. I'm anticipating October 1st because I'm excited to get them back out, because it's a reminder to me that the empire of my own mind is always weaker in comparison to the cozy, close-knit proximity of the simple human towns full of people who care for each other and who care about the seemingly mindless work that they do. And when I look at that little snow village, whatever it is, it's not the big fancy buildings that I'm most interested in. It's the simple little tasks that I see the little people doing in their little tiny environment, because it's everlasting. And it matters. It mattered to me when I was 16, standing in Albertsons with a blue apron on, wondering if the girl that I really liked at school would ever give me the time of day. It mattered enough to feel the worth of my own soul to say, Russell, you're a prince, you're a king. And not only does that girl want to be around you, but so does everybody else in the world. And that's just a small little snippet of the thinking of a 16-year-old. But in a broader view, it goes to God. Sometimes I think, does God really give a shit about Russell Cordell Staker? And I'm still not sure that he does. But when I get done reading something from Whitman, or I look at that snow village, or I'm reminded of working at Albertsons in that blue apron, I think he does. And he's mindful of all of this pain, all of this, because he's on that brisk sideline of the river watching as our bodies are going through this turbulent experience of life. And what matters is that we recognize that it's just a moment, that we have all that we need right here to not only help ourselves, but to help each other, and to take a broader view that the worst suffering and the restless, I pass my hands soothingly to and fro, just a few inches from their faces. I'm really honored to be doing this podcast. It means the world to me. It's a fulfillment in my own heart. And I'm doing this because, quite frankly, nobody else was going to let me do it. So I just decided I'm going to do this anyway. And I'm going to keep doing this podcast. And I hope I get to do this for years and years hence. So if you're listening and this matters, share it with somebody else. And not because I'm trying to grow some big, forceful, body of listeners. It's because this does matter. It matters to me. I think it matters to you, and it can make our world better if we start having a conversation that's more human. So I bid you a good adieu tonight. Please take good care of yourselves. Portion 6 of the 1855 Leaves of Grass will be released really soon. In fact, I'm probably going to do it this week if all things goes as planned. And then the conclusion to this little project is going to follow shortly after. I'm Russell Cordell Staker, and you are listening to These Small Hours podcast. Have a pleasant good evening. Thank you for being with me here in These Small Hours.